So here we are going to start talking about the basics of a sentence. A sentence expresses a complete thought with both a subject and a predicate. Okay, now the predicate typically starts off with a verb. A subject is a noun, a person, place, or thing, or a pronoun. The predicate includes a verb, a word that expresses an action, such as is, were, do, and all these other examples. So, who won the game? In this case, who is the subject, and won the game is basically the predicate, where won is the verb in this particular case. So, in the same way, who let the dogs out? Who is the subject? Let the dogs out is the predicate. Okay. A sentence fragment, however, a fragment expresses an incomplete thought with only a subject or only a predicate. So you need to still complete the sentence. And the idea of a phrase and the clause is that a phrase is a fragment. It's not a complete sentence or sub-sentence by itself. A clause is a sentence within a sentence with its own subject and own predicate. Okay? So if I say an example like, I like people who can sing. Now, who can sing is a clause. I is the original subject of this sentence, like is the verb, and then on to the predicate of the sentence. But within this sentence, you see this part, which is called a clause, because the clause is a complete sentence with its own subject and own verb, and therefore own predicate. A phrase will not be a complete sentence with its own subject and predicate. Then on to the next concept here. Wordiness in a sentence. Okay, so when we talk about a sentence being wordy, it implies that the sentence has redundancy in it, and the way to fix the sentence is basically to remove those redundancies. So here's an example of a wordy sentence and how they fixed it. I am going to run for the distance of 3 miles. Instead of saying that, the correct form is I am going to run for 3 miles. So you remove the distance off completely, and then you get I'm running for 3 miles, because obviously mile is a measure of distance. We don't have to say for a distance of 3 miles. In the same way, you could have a sentence which says I go to the annual fair that is held every year. Obviously it's annual fair, that means it is held every year, so I don't have to expound on it and say held every year. I already said annual. Next example, teachers who educate people often have to work long hours grading papers and planning lessons. Now, by definition, we know that teachers are people who educate people. They're educators. So we don't have to say who educate people. We just say teachers often have to work for long hours. Quantitative easing, the process in which a central bank increases the money supply, can be used to stimulate the economy. This one does not have anything redundant. You might say, well, aren't they saying the process in which a central bank uses the money, increases the money supply? So from between the two square brackets, what we have here is a description of the subject of this sentence. So the subject of this sentence is quantitative easing. Then comes the part which is not a redundant part of the sentence as such. It is a qualifier for the subject, quantitative easing. So it's defining what that is. So there are two ways to insert this kind of qualifiers. You can either start with a comma and end with a comma, or you can start with a dash and end with a dash. And then you go on with the rest of the sentence, can be used to stimulate the economy. So to make it easier for you, you can just say quantitative easing can be used to stimulate the economy. This is assuming that you know what quantitative easing is. If you want to add a definition of that thing, you can put it between the two dashes or two commas. And oftentimes that goes, in this particular example, that would be a definition of quantitative easing. So we saw some examples of wordiness. Now let's see if we can find some examples of parallelism, which is very important thing that they test out in the SAT and ACT. So I gave a brief example of parallelism, saying that all the verbs should have the exact same inflection. Inflection means how exactly you use a verb in a sentence. So the example I gave you before was, I like to sing, comma, dance, and bike. Now if I change the inflection of any one of these verbs, then my sentence will not be parallel. So I can say, I like to sing, comma, dance, and biking. So I had the first two verbs, which were two verbs, meaning I like to sing, comma, I can also say to dance, and biking. Now that's not parallel because I had to dance, to sing, but I didn't have to bike. In fact, you can also share the two and you can just say, I like to sing, comma, dance, and biking. That's not parallel. Or you could say, I like singing, comma, dancing, and biking. That makes this one parallel again. So here are some examples of parallelism. Eating sandwiches and to drink. See, this is to drink, this is eat ing. So they are not parallel. The way to fix it is saying eating sandwiches and drinking milk are my lunchtime mainstays. That makes it parallel. Neither the dog nor the cat made a mess. So this is not parallel because of or. With neither, you should use nor. Okay, and there are four pairs of pronouns like this. With neither, you always use nor. With either, you always use or. Not goes with but, and not only goes with but also. So you should remember these four pairs of pronouns to keep it parallel. And then the third example, respond to the essay question quickly and with thoroughness. You should change that. Since we have kept the adverb form as quickly, we should use thoroughly to follow up with that. Or if I want to keep thoroughness, I should change quickly to with speed and thoroughness. That would make it parallel as well. The next topic we are going to quickly touch upon is modifier placement. So the example I gave you was the table was bought by a witch with long carved legs. The witch did not have long carved legs, the table had. So you should keep the modifier with long carved legs closer to the subject, the table. And then say the table with long carved legs was bought by a witch. Here's some example of incorrect and then corrected placements. The student's work was subpar, not complete all the requirements. The correct version, the student's work was subpar because he did not complete all the requirements. So in this case, it's much more than a problem of simply a modifier. There was missing subject in the second part of the sentence. He, when you said he did not complete, then it made more sense. Second one, my friend pensively enjoyed his dinner, chewing quietly. Now this is an incorrectly placed modifier because the dinner was not chewing itself quietly. My friend was. So you should say my friend, comma, chewing quietly, comma. So chewing quietly, this part is now the modifier and the subject is my friend at this point. So my friend, chewing quietly, pensively enjoyed his dinner. Once the movie was over, unsatisfied about the ending was I. This is placing the subject in completely the wrong place. You could say once the movie was over, this is the modifier. The subject is I. So in this case, I is the subject. The rule is you can place the subject anywhere before the modifier. But if you place the subject after the modifier, you must place it immediately after the modifier and the comma that goes with the modifier. Very important to put that comma over there. I have seen questions in the SAT and ACT where they did it correctly. They said once the movie was over, I was unsatisfied about the ending. They quietly left out the comma, and you are supposed to catch it and insert back the comma to make it correct. Okay, so much about brief discussion of the modifier placement. Let's go on through all the examples and see if we understand it thoroughly. Third one, the fourth one. When driving through the city, many pedestrians jaywalked. Now here's the problem. The pedestrians are not driving through the city. Somebody is. Maybe I am driving through the city. So that subject was missing in this case. So you say many pedestrians jaywalked when I was driving through the city. In this case, the subject is I and the modifier was driving through the city. I could have changed it in another way by keeping the modifier where it is. So this is my modifier. I could keep it where it is and then add a subject after that comma. I saw, and then back to this part. Many pedestrians jaywalking. Or if it was jaywalked, I say I saw that many pedestrians jaywalked. So in this case, I put the modifier, I put the comma, then I put the subject I. Or like they have fixed it, they put the subject before the modifier, in which case you don't put the comma. Next example. Michael Jordan is regarded as the best basketball player of all time, winner of 6 world championships. Now this is the modifier that they want to put with the subject Michael Jordan. But the problem here is the modifier is too far away from the subject. So how do you fix it? You put the subject Michael Jordan followed by comma, then put the modifier describing this guy, winner of 6 world championships, comma, is regarded blah blah blah. Or like we have said before, if you want to use this modifier as a positive, you could just put a dash here and a dash there at the beginning and end of the modifier or the positive. Next one. After eating the whole pizza, ready to take a nap was John. So John is the subject, he ate the pizza, that's the modifier. You need to put them side by side. So you can say after he ate the whole pizza, comma, so modifier followed by comma followed by subject John. Or you could just say John was ready to take a nap after he ate the whole pizza. In which case John would be the subject that comes before the modifier, and anywhere before the modifier is fine. But if you put the subject after the modifier, put a comma immediately after the modifier and then put the subject right after that. Last example. About to get out of bed, the covers were removed. In this case, the problem with the sentence is that there is no subject. So we need to put a subject. About to get out of bed, he removed the covers. So in this case, we have the modifier followed by our customary comma followed by the subject. Or you could have put the subject anywhere before the modifier and said he removed the covers when he was about to get out of bed, which is just fine.